Thank you all for making the time to be here and participating in today's panel discussion, which is titled, I'm Speaking, Rutgers University Newark Alumni as Change Agents. It is my honor to moderate today's panel discussion with 4 trailblazing women alumni. I will first share each of their bios, and then we can dive into the discussion. The first panelist I will be introducing is Aisha Thomas-Petit, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer of AMC Networks. As the network's first DEI officer, Aisha is charged with building on and advancing the company's DEI goals and foundation. She's a key member of the senior leadership team and is responsible for setting the strategy, roadmap, and measures of success to develop, bolster, and retain a diverse and inclusive community, both within the company's workforce, as well as in front of and behind the camera across AMC Network's portfolio of entertainment brands. Additionally, Aisha plays an integral role in advancing the company's commitment to telling stories that entertain with vivid characters and worlds that show the full spectrum of human experiences. Before joining AMC Networks, Thomas-Petit served as Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and Corporate Social Responsibility Officer at ADP. Prior to that, she spent over 7 years at Barclays Capital, where she ultimately became the HR Director for Global Operations. Aisha also spent 8 years at JPMorgan Chase, where she held several roles, including Vice President HR for Shared Technology and Operations and Investment Bank Operations, leading people strategy for a newly merged global organization of several thousand employees. Aisha holds a Master's of Business Administration degree in Marketing and Business Strategy from Rutgers University and a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from Syracuse University, where she graduated magna cum laude. Welcome, Aisha. Our next panelist is Brittany Hale, CEO and co-founder of B&D Consulting Group. Brittany began her legal career as a securities litigation analyst at Bloomberg LP and eventually began to develop legal marketing strategies for her clients. Her results-oriented approach led her into trial work, representing a Fortune 500 company where she obtained a 100% trial success rate in superior and appellate courts. During this time, Brittany used her skills as a former Obama Organizing Fellow to run for office and become one of the youngest Black women to hold office in her state. She is also a 2021 Fellow with the New Leaders Council. She distilled her experience in litigation, politics, and marketing to develop B&D Consulting Group, which helps companies codify, clarify, and elevate core values as an operational framework for decision-making to establish a competitive advantage. She provides cultural assessments, leadership and board alignment strategies, and employee engagement workshops for enterprise and startup clients alike. Her methodology helped an organization increase revenue by 1.2 million. Brittany also serves on the Rahway Redevelopment Agency, where she evaluates developers looking to launch redevelopment projects in the city. In August 2020, she helped develop the first municipal social justice commission in New Jersey and serves as the executive director. She's currently the first Black woman to serve as president of the Rahway Board of Education and is current New Jersey Young Democrats chair of the Black Caucus. Brittany Hale is a School of Arts and Sciences Newark graduate and a graduate of the Boston University School of Law. Welcome, Brittany. Next, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Velez, Chief Impact Officer of Shatterproof. As Chief Impact Officer, Jennifer focuses on the transformation of the healthcare delivery system so that every person with a substance use disorder has access to evidence-based treatment. As Chief Impact Officer, Ms. Velez focuses on growing Atlas, the addiction treatment locator, assessment and standards platform across multiple states in order to ensure that individuals and families can locate addiction treatment facilities. Ms. Velez is a deeply experienced community health executive working to improve the societal and economic issues that impact vulnerable communities. Most recently, as an executive vice president of Robert Wood Johnson Barnabas Health, where she held the health system's interdisciplinary response to the opioid epidemic. Prior to joining Barnabas Health, Ms. Velez served for 8 years as commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Human Services under both Governors Chris Christie and John Corzine. She has the distinction of being the state's longest serving human services commissioner, where she managed the largest state agency with the budget, personnel, and operational responsibility for nearly $11 billion, approximately 16,000 employees, and 8 operational divisions. Jennifer received her Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Drew University and holds a Juris Doctorate from Rutgers School of Law, Newark. And last but not least, it is my pleasure to introduce Tia Ryans, founding executive director of Forte House, the acronym, which stands for Forcing Out Recidivism Through Education. Tia Ryans is a political advocate and a direct witness to the insidious and detrimental impact of the criminal justice system. Her areas of passion and study surround the intersectionality between environmental, social, and criminal injustices that impact disenfranchised communities. She also uses her platform to elevate stories of women and girls affected by physical and sexual abuse. As the founding executive director of Forte House, she focuses on providing a healthy and stable living environment while promoting autonomy for formerly incarcerated students transitioning from incarceration through post-secondary education. Tia is also the founder and chapter leader of All of Us or None, Northern New Jersey, where she organizes grassroots advocacy initiatives and community givebacks to support people directly impacted by the criminal justice system and their family members. She's also an advisory board member of the Princeton University Prison Teaching Initiative and New Jersey Scholarship and Transformative Education in Prisons, or NJ-STEP, to broaden educational opportunities and access to college in prisons. As a first-generation college graduate, she holds a bachelor's degree in both political science and African American and African studies from Rutgers University. Welcome to all our panelists. What a powerhouse we have here today. Before we hear from you, I'd like to frame this discussion quickly as one taking place on the heels of Women's History Month and in the midst of an extraordinary year for women. On the one hand, we celebrate the election of not only the first female vice president of the United States, but also the first Black and South Asian woman to hold such high office. On the other hand, this year has hit women particularly hard, as women have borne the brunt of the effects of the pandemic, whether it comes to labor within the household or the economic impact outside the household due to unemployment. So what this reinforces for me is that women are continuing to make great strides, and it is really important to recognize and celebrate their achievements as we collectively move slowly towards gender equality. But what makes the achievements of our panelists truly noteworthy, though, is that the success they have achieved through their work in diverse fields has happened as advocates for others. They're making sure that, like our Madam Vice President, that their voices are not silenced, that their voices are heard, and they can be change agents creating real world impact. So I'm excited by the discussion to follow. Welcome again. It is truly an honor to speak with all of you today. So to begin, while we have heard a little bit about your career journey from your bios, can you each share a little bit about what led you to do the work that you do? If you could touch on any specific moments or experiences along the way that impacted your career journey and led you to your current role, we would love to hear more about that. And anyone can start.
I guess I'll come off mute and go first. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you and share just a few words that I hope will impact each and every person that's tuning in. I'm Aisha, and I would say that my career journey really started when I was 24 years old. Certainly, I had been working for a couple of years at that point, but it was the moment in time where I really realized, or I thought I knew, what I could do and be when I grew up professionally. And at that time, what I thought I could do and be was become an HR leader sitting around an HR leadership table, which was a relatively big deal back in the 90s and early 2000s for me. I looked around the table at that time and I saw what I identified with as a strong, amazing professional woman named Susan, who, before the term, if I could use the term badass in quotes, was ever coined, this woman represented the epitome of the intersection of business acumen and executive presence and deep rooted knowledge around talent strategy. And so I thought, I want to be like Susan when I grow up. And at that time, there were certainly not many women that looked like me sitting around such a table. And so I thought that that was a stretch goal, but perhaps an achievable goal for myself. And every single step I took career-wise was in support of that goal. What I didn't realize is that at just 41 years old, many, many years later, having spent time in every human resources function, pulling through, elements of, business strategy, et cetera, I didn't know that I would achieve it that early. And so part of me felt really elated having achieved the goal, but part of me felt really bad that I had not planned beyond that point. And so when this happened several years ago, it sort of forced me into a bit of self-reflection and introspection around what I'm really meant to do in the broader scheme of things. And certainly becoming a change agent didn't even occur to me because I was so focused on the title and the spot sitting around the table. I had not put pen to paper around becoming a chief diversity officer or a chief of anything for that matter. And so the road here has been an interesting one, one that I feel I didn't account for every single aspect of what could be. And so my message to people when I'm asked about my career journey is that you can't possibly dream big enough. No matter what road you've traveled, it is incredibly more difficult when you don't see examples of what you can do and be before you. And so today I have the pleasure of operating in an inaugural role in a fantastic company that's at the center of shaping the narrative and from an entertainment and media perspective. And I hadn't planned on doing that. So the journey has been colorful. It's been a roller coaster, but I wouldn't change a thing about it.
So I'll follow up and thank you for having us today. So I think the moment that stuck with me was during a pre-law society trip to the Supreme Court. And a fellow student and we were discussing music, and he told me that I must love rap because it told my story. And that was I know Tia is reacting, but that was a moment where I realized that I had this was someone who, if I'm assuming positive intent, just didn't have the opportunity, didn't have the exposure to different stories being told. And so shortly after that, I was reading an Alice Walker poem, and it began with "Be Nobody's Darling." And I've held that near and dear to me. And that's actually why my company is called B&D Consulting Group. That's what it stands for. And I realized that from that point on, I needed to not be anyone's darling, not have anyone lead the charge in terms of my narrative, and define for myself and for others my contributions and the contributions of women like me to the world. So that's really the moment that I decided to be a change agent.
I'm happy to follow up if that makes sense at this time. Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt. I was looking at Tia to see who wanted to jump in. So I'm Jen Velez. So really honored and thrilled to be on this panel with you all. Really inspiring stories, and congrats on all that you've achieved to this point, whether you anticipated or not in your careers thus far. I had a couple of sort of aha moments in my journey as well. I was first in my family to graduate college as well. And I think operated, to be really honest and candid, out of a place of fear. What I knew was I wanted to get to college. It was so new, and I felt like I landed on Mars a bit when I got there. I didn't really know, I didn't have the guidance. I chose economics because I thought it sounded like business. I just was really in a lost space. I took some time before going to law school, and when I got there, and I loved Rutgers, it's the People's Electric Law School. You go to Rutgers because you think that change is possible and advocacy is in your blood. But then when I got to a law firm, which is what I thought one does when one graduates law school, I didn't like it. I didn't find it fulfilling. The people were lovely. The work was, challenging, but it didn't really kind of feed my soul. I reached out to a colleague who was in government, and he asked if I would like to interview for a spot in government. And at the time I thought law degree, government equals attorney general's office. This instead was governor's counsel's office at the time under Governor Whitman. I'd never heard of this office before, and I wasn't particularly political. When I got there, the natural question, of course, from who would become my mentor, John Farmer, was a chief counsel, and he said, "Why do you want this job?" And I thought, well, here's an honest answer. To be honest, I think I'd like to come to government to make a difference. And I thought, well, that was the end of that interview. And he said, that's exactly why I'm here, because I was in a law firm and I didn't feel like I was making a difference at all. And you can, in fact, make a difference in government. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And that started my career in government, which for my career was so formative. And then the only other quick aha moment that's related, I did spend a lot of my time at the department, leading the Department of Human Services. And it's a privilege to be in that role. When I was growing up, we were on public assistance for a while. The Department of Human Services governs those benefits. I wanted desperately to reform the system so that anybody reliant upon public assistance was able to do so in a dignified manner. I remember a colleague, different department, dropping me off after a meeting in the car, and I was racing to get out of the car up to my next meeting at the department. And he said, "Why are you rushing? The place runs itself." And I stopped in my tracks, and I thought, that's what's wrong sometimes with people who get to these positions. If you literally think that the place runs itself, it's probably time for you to go, because you have a privileged moment in time, but a slice, right, to serve the residents of New Jersey in a way that matters and is really meaningful. And I knew that every day. So it was just a real aha moment for me that grounded me again in why I'm here. And for the short amount of time that you have some privilege to really be in a role of making a difference with some authority that can help impact people's lives, be mindful of that and take it and graciously, of course, but it was indeed a privilege. But just those two moments, the ability to make a difference and not take for granted the privilege you have in that slice of time.
Thank you guys for allowing me to be here. So change agent is such like just a big, phrase for me. I can start with it briefly with story. So at Fort House, it's called Fort House, but you can say Forte. People say it like that all the time. But Fort House, and I walked in one day and one of the residents was sweeping and mopping the steps. And that's a huge thing because they'll keep their area clean in their room, but to do something like clean an area that everybody uses is like really difficult to get them to do. So I was really happy and I was like, thank you so much. And he was like, don't thank me for something that needs to be done. And I was like, okay, great. So we had this conversation on the steps and he was like, do you know who you are? I Googled you and da-da-da. And I was like, okay. He was like, I want to do what you're doing. And I was like, I'm Tia. That's it. You, the same way when I came in here and I thanked you for doing the steps. You said, what did you say? You said, don't thank you for something that needs to be done. And I'm telling you the same thing. Don't thank me for something that needs to be done, no matter how small or how big. So I never looked at it as being like a change agent. It just was something that needed to be done. And that's something that I'm referring to is what I've decided to dedicate my entire life to, which is Fort House, every ounce of my energy, blood, sweat, tears, and everything, which is a collection of all my personal experiences. So I didn't grow up, be a younger girl and say, I want to grow up and do this. It's literally a collection of everything I've been through, any injustice, any unfairness, any oppression. I said, what can I do? Because I don't like it. And I don't want to be a complainer without having a solution. So in honor of transparency, I am formally incarcerated. I got incarcerated as a teenager and I served over a decade of my life inside Edna Man Correctional Facility. And when I was released, I did not have any support. I didn't have a support system, whether it be community, family, or anything. I was just out here alone and I didn't know how to survive in this big, scary world. I came to an area I didn't know. But the one thing that I did have was I started my post-secondary education while I was incarcerated. I was really proud of that because it gave me a reason to hope. It gave me a reason to dream. It gave me a reason to look beyond those walls. Because when you're engulfed in an environment, as any human, it's human nature to survive and adapt to that environment. And I thought that this part of me, that this innocence or this good, I just thought it was going to be completely erased because of where I was. My ambition, my drive, I thought it was just going to be completely gone because it's an environment where it's not promoted, it's not celebrated. And when I knew that this was higher education was being offered inside correctional facilities, I was excited because I was like, wait, this is tangible. I could actually use this when I get out. Like, this is something that I could have. And, in my introduction, you did mention I am a first generation college graduate. So it wasn't talked about in my household to go to college. So for me to be incarcerated, the only one in my family, and then the only one to turn it around and be a first generation college graduate is a really big achievement for me personally. But I knew that going and attending Rutgers and continuing my education on a traditional college campus, as a non-traditional student, it was really difficult. I didn't know how to use technology. I didn't even know how to talk to people in this, I didn't know if I would say words that were foreign, or I didn't know if I could understand certain words because I didn't know what Uber was and Lyft, and I just didn't understand, and I didn't want to come off as like, okay, what planet did you drop off from? So it's a really lonely area to be in, but I knew that's something I really wanted. I may not have known where I was going to sleep. I didn't know where I was going to get a job, but I knew I was going to continue my education. And I kept that no matter what I did, it had to be centered around this. And it was very hard, excuse me. But I kept going, and I realized that during my education, it wasn't just me that encountered these struggles, that we couldn't get past these collateral consequences of incarceration. And those collateral consequences could be not having access to scholarships while you're in college, not having access to housing because you have a criminal record, not having access to jobs. But I noticed that no matter what those hurdles were, we still said we're going to school. I'm not an exception. There are people that my peers, same situation, graduated with 4.0 GPAs, but slept in their car because of a prior conviction. They couldn't find anywhere to sleep. That takes a level of strength and resilience that is not common. And I said, well, I want to fix it. So I chose political science as my major. And people ask me all the time, oh, you wanted to be in politics. I don't like politics. I don't want to be in politics. But what I do like is I compare it to the same way they say the devil knows the Bible. He needs to know it. How does he know how to manipulate people or work people or use their weaknesses? I need to know what systems I'm up against. I need to know those systems. So I'm going to learn them. And then I'm going to figure out who I can partner with or advocate with or talk with or something that will make this transition that I've survived, but for other people to go through easier. How can I work with those systems? I need to understand that in order to enter those conversations. So that's the reason I chose my major. That's the reason I do what I do. It fell on my lap. I said, it's not fair. I don't want to complain. The system's been in place for a very long time. So I'm going to do something different. I'm going to create my own little system. You know, forget a halfway house, we'll create Fort House. Forget a rooming house, we're going to create Fort House. And how do we make it in a way where it connects to higher education? How do we maintain a pillar in a community and keep those, become an anchor in a community and keep those ties and reduce recidivism? And then not only that, how do we scale to other parts of the country? Because there's higher education in prison in other parts of the country. And thanks to the recent reinstatement of Pell, there's always going to be a need for something like Fort House. There's always going to be need for those structures set in place that make it easier for people to reintegrate into society and reduce recidivism.
Thank you, Tia. And thank you, everyone. I am so blown away. It's incredible, the influences, the powerful influences you've had in your life that at a certain point may have seemed small, and in some cases, really huge influences that impacted the journey, the path that you have ended up taking. But I think a couple of things really stood out to me. One is the fact that the importance of having role models, someone that looks like you, to be represented, either the lack of representation or to even imagine that something like this is possible, I think has inspired, some of you to be who you are today. That is, I think, one of the things. The other is the fact that all of you have crafted careers with purpose, because you realized, and I have several students myself, that are business school students, really high achieving, do a few years, are successful, their bank accounts are, really robust and healthy, but then feel like they're lacking something. So at that point, they pivot. And, it seems to me that all of you, by being here today, can set the example early for those young women, students listening in, about the importance of aligning really on your values and your interests with your career path. So you don't have to wait too long before coming to the realization, because it sounds like all of you along the way had these epiphanies about what you, want to do. So I'm glad that you are where you are and are making the impact that you are. I want to pivot a bit to the topic of diversity and inclusion. In some cases, it's really straightforward, right? Like when Tia was explaining the work that you do, but some of you are in actual formal roles which have to address the issue of diversity and inclusion. So how can you speak about how diversity, equity, and inclusion is operationalized in your own work, and how significant it is in the field that you are in?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in here. And because I've been a CDO of now 2 organizations, I have a good comparison or a comparative experience rather. In previous roles, people and talent practices and policies are really at the center of DEI work in corporations, in large corporations. And there's often an element of social impact or corporate social responsibility that is typically intersecting the DEI subject matter, effort, strategy, et cetera. But what really attracted me to AMC Networks was, again, the opportunity to impact what is happening in front of and behind the camera. Entertainment and media is unique in that, you know, what we put forward shapes how people perceive different kinds of people. And it's certainly been historically wrought with stereotypes, limitations around, you know, who and what a person is or can be. And the idea that somehow the work that I'm doing or my team is doing, or in partnership with the broader leadership team here, will carry forward, has great impact on the world. We have an opportunity to show, and we have a responsibility to show, a variety of and a spectrum of lived experiences of people around the world. And we take that pretty seriously. We can't stand on our value of authenticity as a company if the voices telling the stories are not diverse, if the subject matter is not diverse and inclusive. And so today, the DEI work and strategy that we pursue is not just about the talent and the work environment. It has everything to do with the content and programming that we're producing. And so it gets me out of bed every day. It gets me excited about, you know, the broader societal impact that a company and all of the people that make up a company can have. So.
I can jump in if this is a good time as well. Okay, I just wanted to, it's slightly different vantage point into this world. Healthcare's got a long way to go to begin to achieve levels of equity that are, you know, that should be acceptable to us. I saw it when I worked in the healthcare system, that the level of trust, particularly of Black and Brown communities, to healthcare professionals who might be largely white, is that gap is it's a huge, it's more, it's bigger than I could have imagined. And what proves that are the statistics around health outcomes. The levels of different disease states for Black and Brown communities versus white counterparts is just staggering. So a couple of changes I think that have happened that are a benefit to begin to address that is to infuse trust. So one is the infusion of community health workers, people of the community who could then connect with those community members who are seeking care, either in a hospital setting or in a primary care setting, to be that trusted advisor who's of the community. And that's really the qualification. It doesn't require a college education. A community health worker is of the community. That bridging that gap of trust is just invaluable to be able to redirect someone to appropriate healthcare and begin that education, which they want for themselves. Peer supports as well in the substance use area. Peer supports are critical. It's this lived experience that can be for healthcare the game changer to allow people to really embrace what is necessary for their own care. And then finally, just a slightly different vantage point, because I think it's so critical to really address the gaps that healthcare, we saw it with COVID. I mean, if anything was front and center for us, it's the disparities with COVID. I've joined the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine board and sit on the DEI committee. And the whole focus of that, one of the main focuses of that medical school is to ensure that we are training a diverse medical workforce. So that there's an article every day in the media around how we don't have enough medical students in the pipeline who are diverse. And I will say I'm so proud really of the medical school, because we're taking active efforts to make sure that our recruitment practices, are expansive, the mentoring practices are expansive. All of that is necessary so that people can begin to see themselves when they go to their own doctors for their own clinical care. It's really necessary so we can begin to shrink then the really shameful statistics that still persist in New Jersey and in the United States with respect to health equity.
So I did want to call back Tia. I know you mentioned people talking about political science and you sort of having an aversion to politics. And I think that's commonplace, but I also say everything is political, right? So I have a really interesting opportunity in that I'm able to perceive diversity throughout a number of industries. And ironically, they all impact one another. So professionally, when I'm working with organizations, ostensibly they want to take these aspirational values of diversity and inclusion and belonging and make them operational. And one of the issues, one of the questions I have is, well, how are you doing that, right? Because diversity is not something that's just become something that we're thinking about or acting on within the past year, right? So now, what does your budget look like? How are you supporting employees throughout your employees' life cycle? Where are you sourcing, right? Where do you consider talent? And when you go home, right? Who do you interact with? Who do you consider good people? What areas of your town do you go in? These are all political decisions that we bring into the workplace with us. And so it's very interesting because now, as president of a board of education, I'm in a community where 80% of our children are children of color. And statistically around the state, only about 30% of educators are educators of color. So when we think about that, and that's been something that we've pushed and made a concerted effort to address. So now over 50% of our administrators and staff are people of color, but my question has been, how is this individual, how is this child going to be able to relate to their educator? And likewise, how is the educator perceiving this child, right? Are they bossy and misbehaving, or are they exhibiting executive leadership skills, right? That is informed by your ability to reach past your own concept and understanding of the world. We know that Black boys and girls are some of the most disciplined children throughout school districts, and disproportionately disciplined as opposed to white children. That is often because our educators have not been trained and have not been challenged to identify their own areas for like stretching and growing, right? And understanding that there are additional lenses that need to be put on outside of what they deem comfortable. So when I think about diversity, again, it's not, this is something that needs to be related to core values that you have enacted throughout your life. It's not something that you put on at the end of the day, you take it off and you don't need to worry about it until the next day when you come into work. This is how you live, how you love, how you interact with people who you deem is worthy of respect and compassion.
Yeah, and Brittany, I was trying not to sort of double dutch in, and jump into the rope, but everything you said, and Jen as well, just really resonates for me. I have to say that one of the ways you operationalize DEI, whether you're working in a nonprofit organization or heading it in the case of Tia, or working in a corporation or a business that you own and operate, DEI cannot be solved by a single person. When I chose to join AMC Networks, I was very clear that if they were looking for a savior, I'm not it. And so this notion of operationalizing a strategy must come with an element of accountability that cuts across every business unit, function, stakeholder, partnership, etc. Because one person can't fix equity issues. One person can't fix the amount of bias, whether we want to call it unconscious or not, that people show up with in the world because they do not have lived experiences with people who are different from them. And so I spend a lot of my day tackling the depth of relationship that's necessary between people, places, and things. I spend a lot of my time sharing almost too much oversharing of myself. And Tiffany's laughing because we literally had a call yesterday about this, sharing too much of myself because I can't afford to leave myself at home. This fight can't afford for Tiffany, for Sangeeta, for Tia, for Jen to leave yourselves at home. We can't afford it. We have to bring our full self to this fight and to this change. So I had to jump in and sort of, put a little stamp on exactly what you were sharing, Brittany. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and absolutely. And I resonated with everything that was shared so far, but also the fact that all of this operationalization, so to speak, that each of us is asked to do within our respective fields is unfolding within this larger context of social movements and social injustices that, we can't be separated from when we live our lives and do our work. So aligning the work we do with what's going on out there in the real world and lived experiences of people is the challenge. And I think, Tia, you're just in the middle of all of that. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
So we're not really big yet, so of course yet. So so I want to, that's definitely always going to be at our core, because I've worked previously in the environmental field. I'd noticed that there wasn't a lot of diversity and there was a lot of unconscious, I guess we'll say, bias. And so I was fortunate enough, and I'm grateful for those experiences because now I can spot them and understand how to structure things in a different way because I understand how it makes a person feel. It's not just like no one should be uncomfortable going to work. So there are certain things, and just because I'm this person doesn't mean it's going to be catered to this person. It is singling out all races, all genders, all colors, all shapes and sizes. It's nothing to do with just being a Black woman. Like we're only going to represent Black women. No, they're making sure that if whoever is the minority in any room, making sure that they're comfortable and making sure it's an equitable environment, right? But I just want to end with, I always tell people that I appreciate being who I am and stepping into this limelight to represent entire groups of underrepresented or oppressed populations. It's not just, just like, Aisha just said, you can't turn it off. There's no way that I cannot be formally incarcerated. There's no way I cannot be Black. There's no way I cannot be a woman. And then to have all of those things, when you step into a room, it empowers me. And that's what I encourage other women, men, whatever, and whatever makes you the minority in the room, whatever makes you have this history of oppression or lack of anything, or disenfranchisement, you carry that as an empowering tool, not as something that intimidates you. If they are intimidated, oh well, but you walk in feeling empowered because I feel like, I'm representing a large group of this population and I'm going to do it right. And oftentimes you hear, oh, you're not like them, or I'm exactly like them, but it's your fault for not understanding that everyone's not one person. Are you like your mother? Are you like your daughter? Are you like your father? Are you like your uncle? But so that's what I usually just say. Like, I am glad to be the person I am. It's hard as hell, but I use it to empower me. I'm the only person. Oh, well, how you doing? I'm going to represent everybody.
That's great. So, it is noticeable, significant, and that you are all women change agents, right? So as advocates for change in your own fields, I'm wondering what you think about how significant it is that you are, in fact, women leaders occupying these roles. Does that make a difference that you are women doing what it is that you're doing? And is there a lesson, some learning you can share with us that's unique to being a woman leader and a woman change advocate?
I just want to jump in and share something that my grandmother always said never made sense to me until I got older, like most things, right, that our elders share with us. And that's the future has an ancient heart. And so when I think about being a founder of a business, we know that female founders are chronically underfunded. Black female founders get less than 2% of the funds offered to startup businesses. When I ran for Board of Education, I was told it was weird that I was a woman and wanted to run because I had no children. And my response has always been, but I have to live with yours. Right? I am invested in making sure that our community is providing and investing in children in ways that they can see past anyone's limitations, including your limitations of them, right? And so when I think about that saying the future has an ancient heart, I'm here because of my own core values, but standing on top of so many women, so many people who've sacrificed and struggled and created opportunities for me, took a chance, you know, even if they didn't know me, to provide those opportunities. So it's an honor to be in these spaces, as challenging as they can be, because I know that I'm furthering that future. I'm adding to that ancient heart. And, you know, one day I'm going to be able to provide that opportunity for others.
I love your sayings, Brittany. I need your running list too. I'm inspired by them. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in next and just say it is absolutely an honor. It is a pleasure. I am happy to be seen as a woman leader. I do understand why some women would like to remove the women from in front of woman leader. I certainly can see both sides of that coin. But I think something Tia said just resonated with me. I can't not be a woman or perceived as such when I walk in the room. I am still Black when I walk into any room. And this notion that I am charged with helping others understand that I am not a unicorn is something that sits with me almost every day, because I know 100 Aishas. I know, 100 Sangeetas that, you and I just happen to be in the spot. But there's a whole ecosystem around us that I think represents other women and men that have supported us in some way, shape, or form. That has gotten us to the spots that we're in. And so, helping people who are unaware and who choose to center their minds on the scarcity of talent or the drying up of a pipeline. And yes, there are absolutely issues with with representation and accessibility. And you look at women in technology, and you can look at statistics around computer science degrees and how many are held, a percentage basis, how many are held by women versus men. And so the numbers tend to incite fear and concern. But I would say on the flip side of that, there are so many people who could be sitting in the seat that I'm in. And for whatever reason, for a whole host of reasons, they're not. But it's not because they're not talented enough to be here. And so I'm going to keep debunking this unicorn myth because I think it's ridiculous. And every chance I get, personally and professionally, I try to put a spotlight on women just like each of you that are sitting around this table.
I could jump in. That was amazing, Aisha, for sure. Both of you, Brittany as well. The one thing I just wanted to briefly say that I do think is somewhat unique about being a woman leader is that we are always setting an example, or must be conscious of the fact that we're setting an example. It's not unique for a man to be a leader in any one particular thing. Sometimes when there's a woman in that role, I think I've always felt that I'm an example to young girls coming up and young boys coming up, that they need to see strong women leading ahead of them as well. I mentioned I joined Governor Whitman's counsel's office way back in the late 90s. And she's our first female woman governor. She's the first governor my kids ever knew about. She happened to be a woman. That's not different for them, but it was for the rest of New Jersey right at that time. So we're always an example in the sense that I remember one of the most, I'm sure you all remember, the most gratifying pictures many of us saw were the little girls, the compilation of all the little girls looking at the television at our Vice President Kamala Harris. It brought tears to many of us, all those little girls looking up at that television. And so just setting that example for our children, Brittany, I'm so thrilled that you're leading the Board of Education. Without children is okay. Children are our future. So it's right to take a leadership role, but we're just always setting that example. And I do think, I agree with your comment about not being a unicorn, but just that our actions are oftentimes judged, and setting a positive example for our kids and other young professionals coming up behind us as well is always at least top of mind for me.
What I really enjoy about being a woman in a leadership role is the fact that it's like another tool in a toolbox, right? The fact that you underestimate so much of what we can do. It's like we kind of sneak up on you and take it over because it's a tool. I feel like it's like this great tool that I like using. It's like, oh, you thought I wasn't this, or I couldn't do this. So I enjoy that tool. It is frustrating. It's very hard. I'm not going to say that like we're just living in this great world where I could just pull out this magical tool all the time. It's tiring, it's exhausting, but it is a tool. And I would encourage, women to use it as a tool. You don't have to fight to get your voice heard in a way where it's like, give me this, give me this. No, use your tool to sneak around them and take it, create it. But I also try to be mindful of the fact that I don't want to think of it's us versus them. It's not men versus women. It's not formerly incarcerated versus police. It's not Black versus white. It's not that. So I always try to be very conscious that, there were white people that helped, with freeing slaves. There were men that helped with women's, equality. There were, I try to be conscious and make sure I'm mindful and teach that as well. That, yes, we are women. Yes, it is a tool, but at the same time, we can't isolate others because it's about community. It's about working together. And sometimes you do have to pull out that tool and work around and go around till you can knock down those doors from the inside to make sure that we do get equal treatment. Things become more equitable.
And we are going to need male allies in order to, make progress, because they're the ones,
What happened, babe? I'm done talking
right now. That's fine. So Tia, you really led into the next and final question that I was going to ask, and that is, we have a lot of folks, particularly young women at Rutgers University, that will probably be listening to this conversation. So I'd like to know, advice do you have for them, for those who are aspiring for careers and lives like yours? What do they need to see? What do they need to learn or do to consider and then prepare to be leaders in their communities, in their organizations, or the companies they're going to work in the future?
So something I really enjoy saying in different groups is there's going to be, like Jen mentioned, something may be normal now, but it wasn't before. Or something's normal now, but it won't be as time goes on. So that means different behaviors are going to seem abnormal, right? But those behaviors might be a part of your character. They may define who you are. So I would encourage young girls to, whatever does not seem popular in society at the time, whatever isn't something that is seen as accepting, but it's what they define as the worst part of you. You take that and you make that the best part of you. And you do it in a different way. And I'll give you a perfect example. There were people who said I was desperate or crazy or whatever, but it's ambition. So now I am where I am today. So you control that definition. You write your own dictionary. You change that narrative. You think outside those boxes and you move in the manner that makes you feel good. If helping thousands of people makes you feel good, then you do it in a manner that makes you feel good. Being formerly incarcerated, when I was incarcerated, I spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. And because of this environment, I was very young, impressionable, and angry. And I used to fight a lot. And I used to be like, I was leaving the gate and an officer said to me, "You're going to come back." And I was like, "Why would you say that?" And she was like, "Because you fight they said you fight too much." So I decided that's going to be what I still do. I fight systems, I fight oppression, I fight whatever is defined as the worst part of you, you make it the best part. That's it, and that's all. I still fight. I'll uppercut a system. I'll, right hook something that I just don't think is fair. I became an advocate. And you do the same thing in your way, in a positive way, in a way that makes us, enhances who you are and what you want to accomplish. And definitely think outside the box. Don't be scared to push through those boxes. And honestly, as I previously said, you walk into a room, if you're that minority, whether you're a woman, whether you're Black, whether you're formerly incarcerated, you are empowered in that room. You do not let that weigh you down. You don't feel uncomfortable. You are empowered.
Thanks. Who else wants to take that question?
All right, I'll try and follow that one. That was I'm taking notes, by the way. I'm inspired by each of you and what you've brought to this conversation. I'll just share the most important piece of advice I got, and I can't even believe it wasn't even that long ago. If I had to take a guess, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago this advice came to me. So I'm well into my career at this point. But the person who happened to be my boss, male boss, said to me, Aisha, it's not enough to be likable. And, as women, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about whether or not people like us, or if we're showing up in a way that would present, a positive perception of who we are, because, people think we're cool, or that we, have a positive disposition, or take your pick on words to describe likable. And I was a little offended by the comment when it was first said. And I almost had to sit there for a couple of minutes to gather myself so as not to come across as defensive or, unappreciative of the feedback that he was conveying. And after a few minutes, I said, I think I understand what you mean, but share more. And in that share more, I uncovered the fact that in addition to being someone that other people like, people need to be able to clearly articulate the impact that you've had on something or someone. And if that's not part of your equation, if that's not part of the narrative that precedes you before you walk into a room, then you really are doing yourself a disservice, right? Because likable won't get you there, but impact will. And so I would encourage anyone who's tuning in to think about who and what they have impacted, be it one by one, person by person, or one to many, because that's what being a change maker is all about.
That's great. Thank you. Brittany or Jen, would you like to take that question as well?
Sure. I'll reiterate, be nobody's darling. Don't allow anyone else to define your path for you. If you're taking time to figure out who you are, that's okay, but take that time. But just never feel the pressure, or you might feel the pressure, but don't succumb to the pressure of other people's expectations of who you should be, the way you should present, the way you should behave, your life path, because you're the only person who's going to have to live with it. So that would be my response. And make sure that you support other people. You know, people are going to support you, and it's your obligation, it's your honor, it's your duty to provide that in return.
And Sangeeta, I know we're at time, but I think I'll just conclude with maybe where we started. And what I was going to say is be the voice in the room, to really have the confidence and the inner strength sometimes to speak up about that which you think is not right, unjust, seems odd. Why is it that it's this way? Why is the complexion of the board this, or the leadership team this way? What efforts are we doing to make changes? Are we representing communities in which we ostensibly care about or concern ourselves with? Be that voice. It can be really difficult and challenging and scary. And it is absolutely true that oftentimes you are voicing the concern that others are absolutely feeling around the table. And I think I've grown more when I've been that voice. When you think your voice is quivering, and it really isn't, it sounds okay when it comes out, but you're articulating what others are thinking, and they're silently applauding you. And then the real heroes are the ones that actually do, to say, you know, I agree with that. It's so important to affirm, I think, when other voices who, you know, speak up around the room that might be what's not expected. So to really affirm and partner with other voices, particularly of women around the table, is critically important. So I'll end there with what we started with, which is I'm speaking. So thank you.
Oh, thank you all so very much for the really important work that you're all doing as change agents. I have learned so much, and I'm so inspired by everything that you are doing. I know that Rutgers-Newark is very proud of you as alumni of the university. And I will just wrap up by saying thank you so much for making the time to be here and sharing your insights with us.